Did you guys ever notice at bookstores like Barnes & Noble that the self-help is often right next to like the whole sex section? Which I just find that interesting because a lot of people in the self-help land that are trying to fix their issues
are
sometimes the issues
like the
are
temptation.
sex related. Yeah.
That I haven't noticed that, but I'll take a look next time I'm there.
It may be different. I mean, there's not a lot of bookstores anymore like there used to be, but I'm still here for a bookstore. I love a book.
Me too.
And a library. Yeah.
Oh, same. All about library.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to read on a screen.
Maybe strategically, right? The bookstore thinks, okay, somebody comes in because they have an issue with alcohol or whatever. They go to the self-help section and then they're like, ooh, sex, right? Squirrel. They go over and they buy a book on sex and then they have to come back later because now they need another self-help book.
Welcome to the Sober Curator podcast, where sobriety isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's the ultimate life hack. I'm Alysse Bryson, your fearless guide to a world where hangovers are canceled, fun is mandatory, and we still know how to shut down a dance floor, just with better shoes.
And I'm Tamar Routly, aka T-Bouge, your co-pilot, chaos coordinator, and the one who keeps Alysse from turning this podcast into a full-blown reality show. Buckle up, sober party people.
From lifestyle and travel to pop culture and zero-proof cocktails, we're serving up the stories, trends, and guests that prove sobriety isn't just about what you're missing. It's about finally remembering where you left your keys. Let's get the party started. Welcome back to the Sober Curator podcast, where we celebrate the sober lifestyle and all the incredible things that come with it. My name is Alysse Bryson, and I'm your host. And today, you guys, and ladies, not just guys, everyone, I'm so excited about today's guest. Someone whose words have resonated deeply in the recovery community and beyond. If you love powerful memoirs like I do, with storytelling and the transformative magic of writing, you are in for a treat today. That's right. I'm talking about Hannah Sward, the award-winning author of Strip, a memoir, which I found on Amazon, or it found me, and I'm a sucker for a good book cover. I am. If I like the cover, I don't need to know a lot more. And her book cover, I was like, add to cart right away. And I was so happy that I did. Her book has been praised by literary agents like Ben Stein and our mutual sober sister, Amy Dresner, who called it a book you can't put down. Her writing has been featured in the LA Times, HuffPost, New York Times, and the Rumpus, specifically in Voices on Addiction. So, you know, she's got some real insight into recovery and the power of storytelling with those amazing brands behind her. So today, let's dive into her journey, how her past has become her greatest asset, and the importance of finding your people in sobriety. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What an intro. I'm blushing. Yeah, it's such an honor to have me on and your review of the book and that you stumbled across it.
I did. And I'm a little bit of a connoisseur, if you will, a curator. I'm growing quite a vast, what I like to call sober library. And so I don't know how I had missed your book when it originally came out. These things sneak up on me sometimes. It also happened to me with the book Sober Stick Figure. Have you read that one?
No.
Hilarious. Highly recommend. There are stick figures drawings all the way through it, and you will laugh really hard. That one came out in 2016, and it completely totally missed me. But when I found it, I was in love, just like with your book. But yes, I found it. Somehow Amazon knew exactly what I wanted, thanks to the algorithm gods. And it's the second that it showed up, you know, I have piles of books all over my house. People send me books because they want them to be reviewed. I buy books because, let's be honest, I'm a hoarder. And a lot of times when books show up, you know, they have to go kind of to the bottom of the pile because I got all these other books I got to get done. Not yours. It went straight to the top. And I think I finished it in like 2 nights or something. I loved it so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, especially coming from someone in recovery who reads a lot. Yeah.
I do. I love to read. I being a Gen Xer, kid of the 80s and the 90s, like we were trained to be book readers, right?
Yes.
Like we got that scholastic shopping thing every month, which is where my shopping problem started, let's be honest. But yeah, we were trained. We were raised correctly. Well, let's talk about like a pivotal moment in your life that changed things for you in sobriety. And it doesn't necessarily like have to be your rock bottom, but like maybe it was like what brought you to writing the book in the first place?
Wow, it was such a long process for me. Before my addiction really took hold, I was writing and I was publishing in obscure literary journals. And when my addiction took hold, I did go back to school, but my personal writing, my more literary writing, went to the wayside. And when I got sober, aside from getting sober and my biggest dream being able to be a woman that, I always think of this little picture I have of myself and framed in my restroom. And I look so, it's like when I was 6 and I look so sad in it. And I look at that picture and throughout my whole addiction, I would look at it and just feel like I disappointed her. Like I knew I wasn't the woman that I wanted to be or maybe could be. So when I got sober, that was my dream, right? And my other dream and the thing that really haunted me was, am I ever going to write again? And it was suggested to me that I do my steps first, because that's what worked for me with recovery. And so when I was 2 years in, I began my journey. And I remember talking to my sponsor and she said, well, why don't you start with 5 minutes a day? And it reminds me so much of like what we say, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And so those 5 minutes became, in a very slow process, what the book is today.
And did you do it kind of like morning pages, like in a stream of consciousness, just every day, sit down and write for the little chunks of time?
That's a great question. I use those like dollar store journals. I don't know why that's important, but it's important to me because
You're frugal. Everybody needs to know that sober people are frugal. Yes, that's
right.
Right.
And they're not 99 cents anymore, but I like those ones because I feel like I can write the shittiest shit. It doesn't matter. I can just write. So in answer to your question, not necessarily morning pages. I did it whenever, I was very disciplined with it. I said every day, no matter what, I don't care what it is. But yes, I hand wrote 2 pages a day, and it was really whatever came, and really not literally all one sentence, but very breathless, and which really reflected my inner state at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The urgency.
You've journaled your whole life, if I remember correctly from the book. Like you're a journaler.
Yeah. Yes.
How much of your journals did you reference back to that ended up in the book? Did you use it quite a bit, or did it just spur? Like, I'm just so curious about how that worked.
Well, it particularly, I went back to it, and it was particularly helpful when I was creating the chapters about sugar daddies and going back into the sex trade for the 3rd time when I was, I think, 36 or 37 at that time. And I had remembered writing it as it was happening. So I went back through my journals to find those entries. And so there are parts of the book where I just took it right from there. As one concrete example, I remember my sister and I met with a dominatrix because we're like, well, what if we're dominatrix, how do we do this? And so we interviewed her, and I had written it down in my journal. And so that word for word is in the book. Yeah. So it was very helpful, but I didn't do it. I think that was like the biggest section that I did it for.
I imagine that you just have like a box or a trunk somewhere just stacked with journals. Do you?
I do. I have a closet worth, and I'm like, I don't know why I am keeping them.
Well, I mean,
I'm like,
there's got for archival purposes.
That's true. And maybe I need, like I did, to go back into those one day and transcribe and see what's there.
Yeah, I always get jealous of journalers because I want to be a journaler. Like, I love the idea. I mean, I also want to be a minimalist, but I mean, for those of you watching this on the video, if you look behind me, you can see that minimalism is not exactly in my wheelhouse. So, but I like the idea of like capturing, what I'm feeling in the moment and then being able to look back on what I said. I did journal in my first 30 days. I do have a notebook that I journaled. And part of that was because the treatment center that I went to outpatient, and the writing exercises were part of the plan. And I still have that, but I stopped as soon as somebody wasn't making me do it. And I wish I wouldn't. It's just like when I played the piano as a kid. I stopped as soon as my mom told me I didn't have to anymore. Total regret, because now I can barely play chopsticks.
Those 30 days, though, that would be so interesting to take a look at. Like, I mean, I remember keeping one in the early days too, a journal, and I remember days, writing it on there, day 22, day 23, I'd do the days, and those first 30 days, I mean, wow, I bet they're really interesting to read.
And what I find really interesting is when you get to a place in your sobriety journey, looking back at those journals, even just the way we write, you can see if you need that, validation, like you have actually progressed and you have changed. Yes. Those are great tools. Because I remember reading back to when I was married the first time, and I was like, wow, I'm a completely different person. Like, what I focused on then is not at all what I focus on now. So it was that validation, like, hey, there's some growth there.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Do you have good penmanship?
No, it's just terrible. I can show you.
Yes, well, I want to see. So that's why I don't write unless I'm doing an inventory, because my handwriting is awful. I can't even read my own handwriting. Let's see.
Yeah, mine's terrible. And so for people who are not watching, who are listening only, you won't be able to see it, but it's not great. See that?
Oh, actually, yours is very stylistic. I like the slimness of it.
Mm-hmm. I like that view of it, the slimness. Yes, I would say it's slim and unreadable.
You have very like slim and fit penmanship.
Yeah, slick. I like that.
Do you know they don't teach cursive in school anymore? Isn't that terrible?
It's so terrible because it's such a faster way of writing.
Yes. Kids these days, they're not. How do they even write notes to each other? I guess those are called text messages, I guess.
Right. I can't imagine not writing cursive, but
a lost art.
Of course, a lost art.
Even
the name sounds odd now.
It's very slimming.
Cursive, very stylistic.
Yes. Well, maybe we can bring it back. Well, besides your very slim handwriting, what is not slim is the story in your book. Like, it is meaty, it is chewy, it is raw, it is vulnerable. Like, that took a lot of guts to put all that out there. And I'm working on a book myself, and I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day. It's been therapeutic to work on it for sure, but like, you put it out there. So how does that feel? And what did that, like, how did that feel?
Well, it was such a long process that, I mean, there were so many periods where I never thought it was going to happen. Not just going to happen that I was capable of it. Starting with the very beginning, with the 2 pages a day. because I was so uncomfortable in myself, especially with having had a meth addiction. I was used to running for a decade. So that even the thought of sitting down was pretty unbearable physically, but also emotionally, right? Because I was in so much, for me anyway, so much turmoil and anxiety. And so having it actually out in the world, it feels pretty amazing. And it hasn't felt that way the whole time. I've gone through my disappointments with it, the challenges, the book promotion, the expectations, and the writing of it and the publishing of it. Again, it was such a long journey. I mean, the process of writing, it took about 5 years, and it took about 4 or 5 years to find the right publisher. So it was not overnight, but there's something very powerful in that I think by the time it came out, it was really an integrated experience. I hear with other authors that and I've seen it with some of my friends where it's kind of like this big bang and it kind of all happens fast. And I wanted that, right? I wanted it up in lights right in the beginning. But I also see how the grounding effect of it having a slow momentum, which is interesting that you found it 2 years after it was published. Because I think that's more how people have found it over time, which I'm really grateful for because it speaks to, I remember Amy Dresner saying this, Hannah, it's the long game, it's not the short game. And I really love that, right? Because it gives a broader perspective for me who wants a lot fast. I want it all now. More,
Of
more.
course. more and more and more.
Yeah.
Well, and I also loved your book because it starts in basically the Pacific Northwest up in Victoria, BC, which is to the north of the Emerald City. And then it went across the country to Florida. So two very different environments, and then landed in LA. You have a way with words that was, as I'm a very visual person, so I could really see you moving through all these places and like what the houses look like and what you were wearing and like what the smells might have been. Like I was really able to jump into your head or into your story, which is, that's a gift. That's not every writer is able to do that. And that's the part that I just really felt like I went on that journey with you and that we were basically best friends.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry you had to go on that ride as a best friend.
Well, I have meth in my history too, so it tracked.
Oh, then we're definitely best friends.
That is such a dirty drug. That is one. I know there's no do-overs. I know every bad decision we made, led us to who we are today. But there is not regret, but there's just when I think about it.
Same. And there was, I know when I first got sober, people would say, or, there'll become a time where you won't regret the past. And I just thought that was impossible. I'm like, well, I will always regret the past, especially the meth part. And I can say today, but it's been 15 years later, that I don't regret it. That took a long time to come to this place.
Yeah. Well, because your story has helped other people. Probably some that you know of, but I'm guessing a lot that you don't know. Because so many times a book or a podcast episode has impacted me, and I never get to have a face-to-face with the author and be like, I loved your book, right? Like, it affected me. It changed me. It made me feel a part of. And so that ripple effect that is out there, and telling a story as gritty as yours, I think is so empowering and important.
I hope so. I'd like to say I wrote it for other people to help other people, but that was not my intention. I wrote it initially for myself. Yeah.
Are you working on any new projects now?
I am. I'm working on my next book, and which has been about 20 years in the making. I thought it was done 20 years ago, and now I've come back to it, and it's turning into something else, which I love, and I love hearing other people talk about that you don't know where some of your energy is going to end up later that, it doesn't, whether writing or not, in other areas, how it kind of comes back. So I am working on that. It's a very different book. It's about relationships, love, jealousy, and affairs, about a mother and a daughter, and it's fiction. So it will be quite different, but obviously my voice is my voice. And yeah.
Is addiction still in it? Is it addiction fiction, might I say?
No, it's not. Although there might be an addict in it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in a way, the sex part of it could be viewed as, I had an editor read it recently, and she said, oh, this woman is a sex addict. And I'm like, really? Like, I just thought that was dating, like, or like or love addict. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's my intention in bringing it, but that's what she got from it. So there may be an element of that.
So in the pandemic, I came across this book, The Secret Life of a Hollywood Sex and Love Addict by Brianne Davis. And she's an actress, and it is, I honestly don't remember. It's a novel, but I feel like it's based on some of her true life story. And I was reading through it, and it's quite gregarious, and she definitely has a knack for storytelling. But as I was reading it, I had this aha moment of, I'm a love addict. I'm a sex addict, or I was in my 20s. I'm not today, to be clear. I'm maybe a love anorexic is a better way to put it. But in my 20s, I was definitely like, I was like Charlotte on Sex of the City. I just wanted it so bad that I was just literally sleeping with anyone and everyone, thinking that they would fall in love with me, And so I do think that I think that's the power of long-term recovery, one day at a time with no days off, is like we keep peeling back these layers and we discover more. So I'll be interested to see how this new book turns out, and if that character does in fact really identify with being a love addict.
I love this insight into it, or perspective, because it is a woman in her 20s and 30s, which is quite different than where I'm at now. Well, night and day.
You look 31, but okay.
Oh, we're on Zoom, and
and there's filters.
You're sweet talking me, but it'll work. But it will be interesting because it takes on a life of its own, and I keep thinking it's one thing, and it turning into something else. My old limited ideas and beliefs about it have been shattered, or trying to be shattered.
Well, that's exciting. That's exciting. I will be eager to hear for when that comes out. So please keep me posted so I don't find it 2 years later.
I will.
How does it feel to write for big publications like the LA Times, the New York Times, Huffington Post? Like, you've written for some really, big brands. What does that feel like?
Well, that was newer for me. I had been writing articles and so forth prior to that. That was really interesting because it was the Rumpus, the editor there, which is really it was a magazine, or a literary magazine, that I've always admired for many years, and I just never thought it was in my realm. But the editor there for Voices of Addiction had read my memoir, and she reached out and she said, I'd love for you to write a piece for us. And so that was such an honor, and it took me a long time because I wanted it to be good, right? And it really took me about 5 months. But in any case, during that process, I realized, there's some stories here. And the first one, one in a short answer, is it feels really great because it was never on my radar. I just thought, well, that's just too far within reach, and I didn't even know how would that work out, or how is that possible. And I remember my sister was like, you should write something for the Huffington Post. And I was like, she's like, you can do it. And I was just like, well, it's not really my kind of writing. It's more formulaic. And so I remember I set myself up this time last year being, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. So I did. I wrote something. I sent it in. the editor there said, love it, but it's too, what was the word? Unorthodox or obscure for us. So I was like, okay. And my writing group said, well, send it to the Times, the LA Times. I'm like, are you crazy? Why would they send? I mean, this is about meth, right? About my first 3 days on meth. And it was interesting because that came out in one draft, which rarely happens.
That never happens. Yeah, that never happens.
So I sent it in, and 2 days later, they said that they'd love to publish it. And so it's all been very surprising. And I had these goals exactly this time last year that there was 3 publications. I went, those are the ones I want to get into. And so I did, and that makes it sound so much easier. It was, there was other things, there were some challenges, but I did that. And now I'm not so interested in that because I'm working on my book, but it was really fun to set those goals and achieve them. And all 3 of them are very different types. All 3 are different types of writing. Like the Huffington Post, I just did as an exercise, really, because I thought this is not my strong point, and it was really tough to edit. Or the editor and I went back and forth a lot, and it was tough because it's also, it's also about meth, and he wanted me to really include a lot of the backstory in it, and it felt like a lot to do in 2,000 words. So
yeah, that is a lot to cram in. 2,000 words is actually not that much.
Right.
When you realize when you take.
And at first it was just supposed to be 1,000, and then he, said, well, 15. It just kept kind of changing.
What piece of advice would you give to someone who is new to writing, or maybe they've been journaling their whole life like you, but they've never actually put themselves out there? Do you have any advice you would give them?
Well, one, I mean, I don't know how people do it. I know some writers do it alone. I've always had a writer's group or a writing partner. I mean, I met with my writing partner this morning, and has to be a trusting group. I mean, I feel, for me anyway, it's really important that I know where they're coming from, not just in terms of liking my work, but I need to know if their sensibility is similar to mine, if we're on the same page. So I would say find a writing group. It's invaluable. I had a young lady reach out to me and say, will you read my manuscript? And I know she had never taken a writer, and, it was hard to say, but I said, no. I would imagine much too premature, and I'm not taking on a writing student, right? Mm. So the other thing is when you do start sending it out, what I did, and I'm very grateful for this. This was years ago. It was in my late 20s when I first started sending things out. I thought, well, this year I'm going to get 100, not rejection letters. I always called them motivation letters. And to this day, I have a folder. They don't send hard copies anymore, but my goal was 100. And so still to this day, I think it's in the send out. I had a writer reach out to me recently and say, how do you handle rejection letters? Well, I'm like, motivation letters. And I went, put them in the file and move on. I mean, it's just a given. I'm proud of them. I posted it on my social media the other day. I showed how many declines I got on a story that's going to come out next month, because I love sharing that process. No, it took 50 declines for it to find the right home. And I'm not saying that I'm like a stone wall and that doesn't affect me. It definitely does sometimes, or different periods, but ultimately it's just you gotta just let it go.
I can't help but feel like you just described my dating life.
Well, and it's so much like dating. It's like finding the right home. And it does, for me, really test my faith, all of these things where I'm like, is it even possible?
Sure.
And the periods of, no, I don't think no, it's not, or.
What books or authors have been influential to you in your journey?
Well, I'm a big, because perhaps my father was a poet. Poetry has always been really important to me and just part of my life. Books, wow, it just depends what period I'm going through. I mean, right now I've been reading a lot of friends' books and people that authors that I've met along the way, but I naturally am inclined to read more of the classics or more obscure books. I like finding books that are a little off the radar. Yeah. And the ones, that really are not too much in the public eye. I think of my own book that way. And I remember someone had gone into one of my dream bookstores in New York, the Strand. I think it was called the Strand. And she had seen my book on the table, and it was in the section on a table called Underground Memoir. And I really loved that. I was like, oh, underground, because it is. It's not with one of the, it's not with HarperCollins. It's
sure.
So.
More indie. We recently in the last few months added a sober poetry section to the Sober Curator. And much to my surprise, we added it because people kept sending us, they wanted their poems published. And I was like, okay.
Oh, wow.
So we've started this section, and not only are more and more people contributing to it, which is a delight, but people are actually reading it, which is a double delight. Like, it feels like a win-win. So I
love that. And I haven't checked that out yet. And that is so wonderful to hear. And the thing about poetry, in a way, I'm surprised. And then I'm also kind of like, well, it seems natural that people might want to, because it's clipped along. For me, I really like short poems, just like similar to how I wrote the book, right? You might remember, one, like the first chapter is that long.
Yes.
So it's, not many books have 72 short chapters, but I wrote it like that because I was thinking in terms of a little bit like poetry and short stories. So I don't know how long the poems are that you have been putting out there.
They're mostly pretty short, and that is definitely one of the things that I appreciated about your book, and it felt intentional. And I also thought it was like super smart, because let's be honest, we're in a world where everyone is so distracted, and TikTok has basically changed our attention span. Not just TikTok, but it's just like, if you can hold someone's attention for more than 3 minutes, it's like a miracle. So it's nice to have those little stopping, like little short moments, because it also, when you have to stop and come back to something, it's really easy to figure out where.
Well, and that was very intentional. I was like, I want it to be readable to non-readers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have had people reach out saying, I haven't read a book forever, but when I picked this up, because I also wanted to make it where you could just pick it up really at any chapter, and it could be complete in this, like this chapter, Blow Up Girls. Like, you don't really need to read the rest of the, you might, but you could just read that chapter, and in a way, it's a story in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Which I love. Yeah. My nephew actually wrote me a poem about my sobriety some months ago, and made me cry. I was like, oh my God.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
My nephew's 7. I don't think he's there yet, but I'll ask him.
Well, it took until he was 16, but I don't, you maybe a little while.
Yeah. What about, are there any movies or TV shows? I'm obsessed with pop culture, and we love reviewing all these things at the Sober Curator. Are there any movies or TV series that have really stuck out to you over your last 15 years in your journey?
Well, it's a long time ago, but I am Gen X. Basketball Diaries, that's going way back.
That's a classic.
Right. Yeah.
So good.
More recently, I don't know if I liked it, but I still remember it very clearly, is Leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah, that one's dark. Dark. And it's intentional, but.
Yeah, it was So all these years later, I still very much remember that. More recently, not War and Roses. Maybe that is called it, War and Roses. I don't know. It's like a 15s film, but we're talking about pop culture.
I actually know. I went to that. That just showed on Broadway a year ago.
Probably.
The Something of Wine and Roses. The Days of Wine and Roses.
Days of Wine. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I actually went to that on Broadway a year ago in New York. I might have fallen asleep in the middle of it a teeny tiny bit, but Not because it wasn't good. I was very comfortable. And we actually saw it in the
Well, that's a
old.
very nice way of
I was just
saying it.
very
Very
comfortable.
comfortable.
I was just very comfortable. We actually saw it in the old Studio 54. I don't know my numbers today. You know, SNL just is having their whole 50th, and I turned 50 this year. So I'm just
50
everything's about the
something.
50s.
Yes,
50s are the new everything, basically.
I agree.
Okay, as we wind down, I like to move into this section that Tamar always gives me an eye about, but I like to call it sober shots. Don't worry, no one's going to lose their day count. I'm just going to ask you some real quick fired questions, and you're just going to go with whatever your knee-jerk reaction is. Are you ready?
No, that sounds
okay. Sounds terrifying. Here we go.
So okay.
Are you more of a pink lemonade person or a coffee with vanilla cream type?
Oh, wow. Those two, vanilla cream coffee all the way.
Of course.
All the way.
Are you more a cozy at home with a book person, or do you love being out and about in the recovery community?
I love equally both.
That's fair. If you could write your next book anywhere in the world, where would you write it from?
Oh, wow. Well, I had a dream about Italian men last night, so I'd take Italy.
Ooh, yeah. Let's go.
As of last night.
My bag is packed. I'm ready.
As of last night, so.
And then finally, I would like to know what your sober superpower is. What's something you can do now that you could have never done before getting sober?
Oh, well, I can sit with myself. That's the biggest gift. I mean, in the book, which I'll show here.
And me too.
The book is dedicated to learning to sit in the hours. And that's it.
That's so powerful. It's just sitting in your own skin.
Yeah, I never thought was ever possible. So it's, and that's a gift I can take everywhere. And it doesn't mean I always feel it or can access it, but for the most part, it's there and it's possible to access.
Well, and you have beautiful skin, and I think it is because you are beautiful from the inside out.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but Tamara's like, Alysse, could you just stop telling her how much you love her and what a fangirl you are?
Well, it's working because I feel very, very well. I'm loving this. I have, I've done a number of podcasts, and this one's been very lively. It's moved along. You both are wonderful hosts. Yes, and I love your hairdo.
Oh, thanks. This pile of my beehive up here.
I love that look. I love that.
Yeah, it's taken on a life of its own. I'm not sure what else might be in there, but
I do have to go back to the pink lemonade. Those are my two things: pink lemonade and coffee and vanilla creamer. But definitely the coffee and vanilla. What about yours? You both.
I am an iced coffee with vanilla creamer, but it has to be iced. My coffee is iced year round. I don't like to consume warm liquids.
I could see that. What about you, Tamar?
I am definitely the coffee with vanilla creamer. Now, if you were to bring ginger beer into it, specifically Betty Buzz all the way. Yeah,
that's Blake Lively's line of ginger beer.
Ooh,
I got Tamar addicted to it, and we had to have a small intervention.
Yeah.
Oh, then I won't try it.
She bought quite a few bottles and tried to get them over the border, and well, Hannah, I think you should try it. They're delightful. They're very ginger though. If you're not if you're a ginger lover, you're going to be down. And the packaging, the bottles are adorable. She has a couple other flavors in her line as well, but I'm particularly fond of that one. Mm-hmm.
I'm on a hunt today, right after this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if I become addicted, I'm going to call you both, and I'll have to do it. I'll have to do a little inventory because I'll have a resentment.
Mm-hmm. We got, definitely. I mean, and I don't mind being part of it because I'll own that right now I could be contributing to this, but
it'll be like this mix between gratitude and resentment.
Let's just all talk and get it out. Let's put it on the table. That's what we do.
And to be clear, this episode is not sponsored by Betty Buzz, but Blake, if you're listening, future episodes could be, or you could just come on and we'll gush all about you while we're sipping Betty Buzz.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Well,
all
Hannah,
in.
where can our many, 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 many listeners find you and stay connected?
Well, you can find me at my name, hannahsward.com, or on Instagram, Hannah Sward author, or at the Sober Curator. They'll have a little bio right under the
Yes.
episode, or you guys are I'll be writing for you guys, or
Yes, you'll have a piece there, and I have the review of your book is there. And yes, you will, by the time this episode is dropped, you will have a piece on the site. So not only will you have been featured in the LA Times and the New York Times and the Huffington Post, but now you can add the esteemed Sober Curator
Sober Curator
to your resume. It's
well, I will, and I love that. And yes, and I'm so happy to have a piece there because it also gives an idea of the book. So it kind of, well, very strong idea.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your wisdom and your incredible writing. Your journey
Thank
is
you.
proof that the past, it really doesn't define us, and it can actually become our biggest asset. And to our listeners, make sure you stay tuned for our next episode. We've got another incredible guest coming up, so you're not going to want to miss it. And as we like to say at the Sober Curator, getting sober matters, staying sober matters more. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Alysse Bryson, and until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep it sober. Thanks for tuning in, because let's be real, we're way more fun than your ex's drunk texts.
If you laughed, learned, or just need more of our voices in your life, honestly, I mean, who wouldn't? Hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and send this episode to your sober or your I swear I'm only drinking on the weekends besties.
And if you have a story, feedback, or hey, maybe you just want to slide into our DMs like it's 2012, well, you know we're here for it. Find more curated magic at thesobercurator.com. And remember, getting sober matters, staying sober matters more. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep it sober.